Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Wrap, brought to you by Michigan Medicine Headlines. I'm Dan Ellman with the Department of Communication.
I'm Dan's trusty sidekick, Jeremy Fowles, also with the Department of Communication. Today, we are going to preview an important disability awareness event coming to the area later this week.
Now, before we dive into that discussion, be sure you dive into any of the previous episodes of The Wrap you may have missed, including last week's, which commemorated Mental Health Awareness Month. Find that show and all the others on your favorite podcast hosting platform and the Michigan Medicine YouTube channel.
On that note, let's bring in Dr. Michelle Mead, Professor of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation and Family Medicine, and Director of the U of M Center for Disability Health and Wellness here at Michigan Medicine. Michelle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Michelle. Now, on June 7th, there'll be a disability awareness event at Washtenaw Community College entitled Let's Start the Conversation. Can you tell us more about the event and what its goals are?
I would love to, and thank you so much for featuring this event. We're very excited for our June 7th event, the Starting the Conversation, Exploring Health and Resilience in Southeast Michigan's Disability Community. This event is to really celebrate the disability community. It's to help in creating community and to really notice the resilience. As you know, too often medicine takes or looks at disability as something to be cured. You know, the typical medical model. We think we're the experts. We see individuals with disabilities. They're here for us to treat, to gain the experience of the medical professionals. And definitely the medical community has access to the resources. We serve as gatekeepers to physical therapy sessions, to medicines, to notes about how people are allowed to interact or what options they have. But the disability community is a resilient, rich, diverse group of individuals who generally figure things out by themselves. They work with their families, they work with the communities, they rely on their own knowledge and strengths to get things done. And I guess at the Center for Disability Health and Wellness, when we think about how do we make healthcare more accessible, how do we work in partnership with the disability community to work on improving health, it starts by listening. What are you most concerned about? How do you want to work with the healthcare providers? What do you wish they know? And so that's where it starts. And so it's both thinking about the community in general. What are your priorities? What are the key issues that healthcare providers, that healthcare systems need to know? And what are some of the unique challenges that are going on? And we specifically think about those associated with race, because we know there are a lot of more negative outcomes for individuals from certain communities. And whether that is about African American females who are, having babies, or those are with individuals, African American males, and different rates of pain prescriptions. The research tells us real healthcare disparities exist. There are different outcomes for different groups. We want to hear from those groups as related to disability. We want to know, what do we not get? What are we missing? How do we do things better? And how do we focus on the resilience? Because once again, health happens at home. Healthcare providers may have resources, they have knowledge, but there's a lot of behaviors in there, and not just negative behaviors about things people do wrong, but how people prioritize, what makes their life purposeful, how do they put the pieces together? Those are what we need, and how healthcare systems and healthcare providers need to be aware of if we're going to work in partnership with people, if we're going to support people to live their best lives, to do the lives that they want, that make sense to them. So with this event, in short, what we're trying to do is just say, we know that the disability community is diverse and has a lot of resilience. What we want to do is listen to that. We want to we want to celebrate that. We want to provide information and resources that we may know of. And then we want to just help create community, especially during these chaotic times. We want to take a moment. We want to pause. We want to catch our breath. And we want to think about how can we move forward together.
There are so many things real quick that I just want to follow up on in what you just said. And as you know, this hits very close to home for me. I have spina bifida. I use a manual wheelchair. I think a couple of the things that you mentioned that really stood out to me. Number one, people in the disability community aren't always looking for a cure. I'm not sitting here hoping for someone to cure my spina bifida. I'm living with spina bifida. It's just a fact of life. It's a fact of life that I'm planning to have for the rest of my life. And so how do I live my best life now with this situation using the wheelchair? Or are there other mechanisms that I can use to live the life that I want to live? And so I think that's super important, right? I'm not coming to the doctor to have them cure me. I just want to live the life I want to live. And that's the kind of support I need. And then number two that you touched on, and maybe you could follow up a little bit too, is no two disabilities are ever the same. Right. So I have spina bifida, and some of the kids I coach on my wheelchair basketball team, they have spina bifida, but our actual, how it manifests itself is so different for what I deal with on a daily basis and what they deal with on a daily basis. So even knowing what the diagnosis is, the prognosis is very different, and the things that doctors need to be aware of are very different. Can you sort of just elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, definitely. And you're talking even about this, as you said, the same diagnosis. And many of these diagnoses are really broad. They have different levels of severity with them. They have different functional impairments associated with them. Sometimes it's just physical. Okay, you use a manual wheelchair. And sometimes there may be folks who use a power wheelchair or a different type. And sometimes there are cognitive pieces or sensory pieces. And so these are really wide ranging. So it's what is happening at the level of the impairment or the diagnosis. And then there's who gets it and what family it's, impacting, and what resources are there in the environment, in the community, based on policy, based on insurance, based on so many factors. And, and then personal history. And do you know someone with a disability? How does this affect your family, your community? So as you said, that the diversity within the disability community, within individual diagnosis is so broad, that often when healthcare providers think about, okay, I'm going in and I'm the expert, they may know something about a diagnosis. And that may be more or less than the person they are interacting with knows, based on how long they've lived with it. For you who've been living with spina bifida your whole life, I would say you're pretty much an expert. There may be things
I know how it
come
impacts me. Yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's what I think too often healthcare providers forget, that they know a piece and they may know the latest research or some of the medicines or some of these interactions, but how these play out for you or what you want in your life or what choices you would make given the options provided is going to change. And too often we're not even at that level. A primary care provider may just know, oh, you're coming in with a wheelchair. Oh, what things do I have to know about the wheelchair, about transportation or how that impacts your life? And, oh, what things may wear it on your body faster based on that? And all of these pieces together. And so it starts with just listening. I guess this sense of basic respect that your life is valuable, that it's not, oh, you have a disability. And so, there's something less or something that then you're under my treatment or care. It's that you're then have a disability and maybe that makes you need to work with the healthcare system more often, but that you bring that sense of experience and interactions and history with you. And sometimes those interactions are good and you can have positive relationships characterized by respect and resources and a discussion, or they can be negative, characterized by people patronizing you or saying, oh, well, no, we have everything you need, or we know of everything, and medical
A lot of
trauma.
times people will talk to my wife instead of me and ask questions to her. Yeah.
Right. And so we know that happens. We know that happens way too often. And with this event, the goal for me as the center director is to listen, to say, I know this happens. I'm sorry. I know that you're the expert in your own lives. I have access to some resources. I interact with, with research. We conduct research. We think about how do we translate that? But translating it both for people living with disability as well as healthcare providers. So for me, I'm listening not just to figure out how to package the research I do, but also about what do those providers need to know? How do I have to package or share information to them so that they can better connect, so they can better serve, so that healthcare is safer, so that there's better access and that there's going to be better outcomes. So it's a lot to fit into the event, but I think, this is the first year of us doing this. This is the starting with, let's just be together in space. Let us listen. Let us provide lunch, provide a meal. Maybe we'll hopefully have some music. Let us provide or ask some of our colleagues from the community to come to share information about the programs they have, to share information about some of the financial resources or such that may be available. Let's put people together in the same space and just sort of put forward a hope for connection and respect with the idea of once again moving forward together.
I think that's a wonderful sentiment, and I think it's something that is definitely missed among the greater community. And what you're doing is excellent work. And I guess one of the main questions you talked about the goals that you have for this event, but I want to kind of go into like your personal and professional version of this. Like, what is your role with this event, and how does disabilities and the work that you do impact both your personal and professional life?
Okay, I think there's a lot to unpack there, probably. And so the Center for Disability Health and Wellness is something I founded based on grants that I have. I've worked definitely with colleagues in the community, Dr. Micah McKee, Dr. Steve Erickson, others. There's a growing community here at Michigan Medicine and the University of Michigan who are very interested in partnering with people with disabilities. We know that disability isn't something to be fixed. We know this is people with diverse needs and backgrounds, and that healthcare has to do better. And that we've been partnering and trying to leverage one another's skill sets and expertise and knowledge and trying to move the needle on creating a system that makes more sense. This event is one of those opportunities to say, oh, let's just take a breath. Let's spend some time with the disability community. Let's offer the opportunity to get together. And it was kind of inspired by Alfreda Rooks and what they've done with the community health services, So I went to the Aging and Racism event for MLK Day that was held by the Community Advisory Board for the Turner Geriatric Center. And I was very moved, by how they had a ceremony, by how they were listening to the community, by how they fed everyone, but it wasn't a research event. It was about taking a breath and connecting and developing a sense of community. And I realized I would love to see that happen. That, too many times I hear, oh, but there isn't a disability community, but people aren't connected, and there's power in doing that. Peer mentors, knowing other people are going through this, that you don't have to just rely on your doctor for this is huge. And we're lucky enough to be in a place where there are many different associations, where there are many programs and resources. But if people don't know about them, that's a problem. Or if they're only connected through me. And so we really hope to see people just connecting with one another, learning about what's out there. And we hope to grow this, each year, but we want to start someplace. My personal experience with disability is, I guess, one of my best friends, or two of my best friends in college, both had significant disabilities. One had a severe juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and the other was a double amputee. And, those in my college friends were just like, oh, you learned how to do stuff. But you also begin to see and recognize the impact of the environment on either supporting or limiting activities. And I don't know, maybe more than a decade ago, I remember sitting at a kitchen table with my friend Linda, who's since passed away, and just talking about her inability to find an accessible scale so that they could get the right weight for her for when she went to have surgery and anesthesia. And I researched it and I looked in and I knew definitely of the issues that go on in the disability community. But I didn't realize like 2/3 of clinics and health systems don't have access to that. That number is unbelievable and it's ridiculous. We're a healthcare system. Our job is to work with individuals with disabilities. It's to take care of people. It's to provide access to healthcare. If we don't have the right knowledge or tools to do that, how can we do that? And then it was working in Richmond with, similar to here in Detroit with a primarily African American community and thinking, oh no, we have the answers in healthcare. And then learning about the healthcare disparities or the differences in how people were treated and listening to that. And it could be based on age or race or gender or body type. But too often we bring our own perceptions into those interactions and those limit how we think about people. And so I've had friends who, have talked about interacting with healthcare providers and saying they just, I come out after surgery and they're planning for me to go back to our nursing home rather than really even asking me where I live. That they don't ask me if I need a contraception or what I'm thinking about with regard to parenting. They're just advising a hysterectomy. They're not bothering to see me as a person or see my goals and work with me to think about how we can help get there. They're just making assumptions. And for me, and for many of my colleagues here at CDHW, it's moving beyond that. It's recognizing that people with disabilities can and should have full, rich lives, that healthcare should be adding to that and providing opportunities. But then also knowing that during COVID, too many people with disabilities were afraid to go to the health system, afraid of having the resources that they currently had access to taken away because their lives would be seen as not as valuable. And I do think we still need to recover from that we still need to say, we see you. We recognize that you don't necessarily need us to fix you, that you may need access to medicine or wheelchairs or prescriptions, but that we need to figure out how to work in partnership so that you have better health outcomes, so that the health system works better, and that we develop systems that are relevant, that are supportive, that are accessible, and that we all move ahead better.
Yeah, I think the assumptions thing that you talked about is so important. I briefly mentioned that sometimes they'll talk to my wife and not to me, but there was an interaction I had about a year ago. It was at Michigan Medicine. So I don't want to, just say that everything's great here, where a team member looked at my wife and said, "Oh, are you his caregiver?" And just assumed that, hey, I use a wheelchair. There's no way I would be married to an able-bodied wife, right? And she very sternly looked at her and said, "I'm his wife." And she wanted to make that point that, like, no, I'm not the caregiver, and you shouldn't assume that just because he uses a wheelchair that he A, has a caregiver, and B, it's me. And so I think that's making assumptions is so important to not do that. And it is harmful to the people that it happens to. It's those little microaggressions. I wanted to shift gears a little bit outside of just, what's happening in healthcare and talk a little bit about sort of advancements in the world and the struggles for disability rights and the disability rights movement. Why do you think things take so long for changes to be made? I know this is a very loaded question, and we don't have the next week to talk about it, which we could. But I'm thinking of things like the ADA didn't come in until what, 1991? Americans with Disabilities
Passed in 1990, right? Not implemented
Yes,
until 1992.
Yes.
And then, right. I think too often our systems are set up so people with disabilities aren't seen. Invisible disabilities, non-apparent disabilities aren't recognized. The conversation isn't about disability, isn't put forward. And so people don't feel comfortable talking about it, talking about what it is. And then once again, it's not one thing. People can easily identify a wheelchair or a cane, but otherwise, they don't know what to think. They don't know how this fits.
Yep.
And then some people are fearful that, oh, this may be something that impacts me, rather than, okay, we have a different range of functioning. There are different things that our systems need to accommodate. But the fact is that our systems were set up before we thought we had to, when people were still being hidden. And so, when disability was not being talked about. And so because of that, we're going about retrofitting everything. And okay, let's make sure that people can still get in the door. Let's make sure, but they weren't built up with those prospectively in mind. And because of that, too often it's forgotten. And because people don't see it, people don't regularly talk about it, they don't have to consider it. And if it's easier not to, there's a lot of other things to think about or talk about. Healthcare has a lot is juggling, in terms of how to make sure people are safe, how to make sure they don't get infections. And they don't necessarily think about, well, how does this person, I got the wheelchair thing down. See, I have a ramp, but how do I think about someone who has autism or someone who may have a brain injury, who, or who can't read because of that? It's not one thing, and that's hard to wrap your head around. And it's not one person or one representative group. And so how do you integrate all of this? And so I really think it starts by have the conversation, really think about the breadth of what we're talking about, but really try and focus that on a sense of respect and the idea of value. People are valued. Their life has meaning. What we're trying to do is not to fix someone, it's help them. For us, access to safe, high quality health care. That's what we want to do. That's what we need to figure out how to do it. And we don't necessarily have the answers. In society in general, saying we don't necessarily have the answers. Their ADA may say something specific for one particular group, but then it's like, and then it's a matter of conversation. How do we help work with you or work with the community to get everyone to a better place?
I know some of the things that you summarized have been super impactful, and it's more than just this one-time event that I hope you do more than just this week. However, it's something that is continuous learning, and so what are some of the tools and tips and resources that you might have for our listeners who can't maybe go to the event but still want to help out, still want to learn and be better, just be better people when it comes to supporting and being an ally for the disability community?
And so one of the things that we do have here at Michigan Medicine is called the Disability Tab or Disability Field. And so this is it's pretty unique in the United States of that individuals with disabilities can identify themselves in the medical records as having a disability and requesting a certain type of accommodations. And then healthcare providers can see that. And hopefully they can change the way they can provide healthcare. They can think about, oh, let me put them in a different room, or let me schedule a different way, or, and to have those type of accommodations available across healthcare visits and across specialties and not have to drill down or ask each time. Disability is not something to be ashamed of. And so once again, the more we can be prepared to provide high quality health care, the better the outcome for everyone. So that's one thing, knowing that that is a resource and that's something that can be requested. And then to remind people, oh yeah, I requested this. Are you going to have it available? Are you going to have that list to help get me on the table so that I can have a good wellness support net? Another thing is to know what other resources are available in the community. We have a wonderful disability network here that can be a starting point. There is the Michigan Disability Rights Coalition, which has the state contract to provide assistive technology or low-cost loans so people can access various types of devices or loan, whether that is, I think, access to PDAs or, but there are also places that have loan closets for wheelchairs or walkers. Is beginning to know that there is a community to ask, that people can begin to help you get connected. And then I think just expecting to have that conversation, to have preventive care, to know that disability isn't something to be ashamed about or to hide. That we want, I guess everyone should want, right? People to have opportunities and full accessible lives. That disability doesn't mean you're not going to be employed, or it doesn't mean that you're not going to be married, but it does mean that you may have to do things differently. And so the more we can communicate about that and make sure the right systems are set up, the better the outcomes for individuals and society. And so, know that there are resources out there, know that there are people hopefully in your primary care office across Michigan Medicine to help, and that, that there are rights, whether it's the Americans with Disabilities Act, whether it's Olmstead to keep people out of institutions, whether it's the Affordable Care Act, which does say that healthcare providers and systems need to have knowledge and be accessible, or websites that need to be accessible. These are all things that we may not be perfect, but we can remind people that we need to work together to create outcomes that work, and that is the goal in the end.
I love that. And if I just may add one more thing, it's almost it's a tip that I give people, and it's not necessarily a positive thought, but the interesting thing about the disability community is it's the one community that anyone can join at any time. If something terrible happens to you, if you get into a car accident, or if, you come down with some sort of, infection or something like that, you may end up having a disability for the rest of your life. That doesn't mean your life is over, but it just means but you need others around you to help be your advocates, because I will be honest, it's tiring to advocate for yourself constantly, every single day, and every interaction that you have with people. So keep that in mind when you're just going about your daily tasks, is what can you do to make this available to everyone, whether it's somebody with a visual disability or a hearing disability, or like you mentioned, a brain injury or anything like that. If there's anything you can do, you should do it, because that could be you someday. And, or it could be your best friend or your child or your parent, and you don't want it to be, and that's fine. And I get that, but it might be. And so to just always keep that in mind. I don't mean to bring down the conversation, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
But I do think, you're talking about that we think about it in the retrofitting. How do I fit my life in to make it work? But it can also be thought about as a resilience thing. How do I make sure that everyone has the opportunity to access this? How do I make sure that what I'm doing, whether it's a job or employment or an event, is really allows everyone in the door, and that I allow myself to connect with everyone? Because in that way, I will get more perspectives. I will learn how to do things in different ways, and I will learn a sense of resilience. And I think from the healthcare providers' side, we have to think about what we learn. I'm a rehab psychologist, and I often work with folks with spinal cord injury or soon after earlier in my career, it was more folks who had just had a spinal cord injury, and there was folks aging with a spinal cord injury and other physical disability. And so it's thinking about, so if you still want to have a life, and life is still important, and you want to have a sense of meaning, what are the different things you can do to make it possible? And it may not be what you did before, but it may be engaging with new people, changing the environment, thinking about different things in a different way. And that type of flexibility, I do think is something we need to build into our systems. And that challenge to engage, to get to know, to listen to everyone is what we want to encourage our community and our healthcare systems to do.
I love it. Thank you so much, Michelle, for putting such eloquent words on a topic that's near and dear to my heart. If you want to learn more about the event coming up later this week, go to mmheadlines.org. That's mmheadlines.org.
Okay, it's time for the lightning round. This is where we get to ask our guests 4 questions that they have no idea on what they're going to be about. Michelle, are you ready to go?
Sure.
All right, so summer is just about here. This could be a vacation or a special event. What are you most looking forward to this summer?
Well, 2. 1, I'm going on sabbatical, so I will actually get time to step back a little bit, catch my breath, refocus, and my sabbatical is focused on how do I have more impact with my work. But then on vacation, I have a trip to Ecuador planned. So I have an 11-year-old daughter, and where she loves animals and nature. So we're going to see the Galapagos, and then we're going to go to the Amazon.
That sounds wonderful. If you have any extra space, let me know. Of course, with summer comes the thought of hot weather and maybe finishing the day with the perfect ice cream. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Ooh, I happen to love the basil ice cream at Blank Slate Creamery.
Wow, that was off the board. I was not expecting that answer.
Yeah, I mean, Ann Arbor, we get some of these craft flavors around here. And so that's one of my favorites.
Love it. All right, June 1st was National Game Show Day. If you could be on one game show, what would it be and why?
Let's Make a Deal, maybe? Or
there you go.
Yeah, is that the one where you have to tell how much things cost? Not that I really
No, that's
know
The Price is Right.
Oh, The Price is Right. Okay, I used to like how they could buy stuff. Okay,
yeah, go with that.
Or the other at the end.
Yeah, you
so
get
maybe
stuff.
That, and not because of the game show or the trivia, but just how can I not embarrass myself quite that much?
Okay, so back to work for just one quick second. Who would you say has been the biggest mentor in your career?
I was lucky enough in graduate school to have a mentorship who took me on for a dissertation. Thomas Creer. He's since passed away, but he did work on asthma. And he was really focused on, his work on asthma was related to self-management and how to give people the tools to know what to do and to know when to do it, but also not thinking that there's just one way or one approach. And thinking about how to partner with healthcare providers, how to reach out to the communities, how to develop different types of systems. And so that idea of just a warm, mentoring individual who thought about uplifting people, working to improve their health, and also to know that systems needed work as well, I think was probably one of the most influential people.
I like how you brought that full circle from the lightning round back to our original conversation. I love that. Good job. Thank you so much for playing along, Michelle, and for sharing your incredible insight into disability awareness, the disability community, and the upcoming event this weekend. If you want to learn more about that event, be sure you go to Headlines at mmheadlines.org. That's mmheadlines.org.
All right, Dan, we asked Michelle which game show she would want to be on, and I already know your answer, so just tell everybody what you got.
Well, maybe you don't know okay, it's Jeopardy. That's what I want to be on. I don't know enough to actually be on Jeopardy. So to Michelle's point, I would probably embarrass myself. But like if they had like a sports category, I know I would run the table on that category and like nobody else there. They always shy away from those sports categories. So I think back in the day they had a sports Jeopardy or there was like Stump the Schwab on ESPN. I would love to do something like that. But since it's not really an option right now, I'll just go on normal Jeopardy and embarrass myself. What about you?
I mean, Jeopardy is the one for everybody. And I when I
Not
was
for
in
Michelle.
college,
She's like, no, keep me away from that.
that's true. I mean, when I was in college, I was close to being on there. I didn't quite get to be a finalist for it, but I would love to another shot if I could. But Stump the Schwab, I think, would have been like the crowning achievement of any sports fan, trivia quiz nerd type thing. So those would be the good ones. I also like Press Your Luck. That's a good one. That's fun. I think that came back.
Is that the no whammies one?
Oh yeah, no whammy, no whammy. Yeah, stop. So those would be the ones I'd want to go with. Even that one's mostly luck now. If anybody's seen the documentary, it was able to be gamed. It's no longer be able to be gamed. But
Wow. Well, thank you so much to Michelle for joining us and sharing her knowledge. I think this was a really insightful conversation. It's all the time we have for now. I also want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for everything you do for patients, families, and each other. We'll see you next time.